Reveille, reveille.
Look at us now.
Oh, Jesus.
It's what, 11 a.m.?
Kombat.
Whoa.
You fit in seamlessly in this weird MK environment.
Do you want a margarita?
We're gonna do it. On your marks, get set, and go now.
Oh, blame Canada, which we're gonna do for the air quality here on the East Coast of the United States, but not right this minute. Right now, let's get to what we have to get to. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Morning Kombat. I am merely one half of your hosting duo. My name is Luke Thomas. I join you from the capital of Estados Unidos. We're here in Washington, D.C., joined by my Canadian brethren who may or may not be responsible for all this smoke. It's Aaron Bronsteter. Hi, Aaron. How are you, bud? From Sportsnet, by the way.
I'm good, Luke. Yeah, you know, the fires are happening. So the distance that these fires are from us here in Toronto, they're in like the Thunder Bay area. And if people are unfamiliar with how big this country is, the distance from here to Thunder Bay, at least the driving distance, is like similar from like driving from here to Miami. So that's how far away these fires are. And it seems like it's taken a toll on, like you said, the entire East Coast. But today it seems like it's better. The air quality has gotten better. I was just outside earlier and I'm not smelling the same kind of campfire smoke smell that we've had the last couple of days. So it seems like things are hopefully starting to clear up.
Well, they got worse down here. I mean, they've been a little bit, there was some air quality warnings, but today it's so bad I couldn't take my daughter to summer school on the bike. I was like, there's no chance I'm doing that. So I guess we're getting it a little bit later. What caused them? Is it just like brush fire season, climate change? What was it?
Yeah, it's just wildfires. 2 days ago was one of the all-time highs for that particular day. At least in this city, it was in like probably close to 115 degrees sort of thing. And I'm trying to convert to Fahrenheit, and I'm doing the best I can. But it was just extremely hot outside a couple of days ago. And I guess when you're in northern Ontario and there's so much forestry, these wildfires tend to break out. And I saw some footage of, I don't know if it was a plane or something where they were trying to extinguish the fires. And it just looked like they were engulfed in flames. So it's pretty bad, but it seems like it's improving, which is at least good news for now.
Well, I certainly hope. Well, nevertheless, we're not here to talk about wildfires more than we already have to. We have a lot of MMA to get to. So welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. On the docket today, I mean, what else can we talk about? We have to lead with UFC Oklahoma City, a phenomenal main event that we're going to break down, plus some gems on the card. But again, a really rock-solid main event. PFL is back with actually a bit of a sleeper main event, I would say, down there in Texas. And then we have a bunch of smaller news and notes, not including but not limited to, I should say. Ryan Garcia is going to box Conor Benn on a ZUFFA boxing show on Paramount Plus for the WBC welterweight title, which I did not necessarily see coming. So all of that and more. Thumbs up if you haven't on the video. Please hit subscribe. And you can follow us on the social channels right there. Also, we have one more on this. We have you become a member of the channel. We get you can have emojis, badges, and more to come. We have an email, morningkombat@gmail.com. That is for fan subs, dead wrongs to reach the show. And then, of course, merch, morningkombat.shop. Look at all of the designs that are available this month. Everything from the basketball to Duncan to, or I should say Donkin, what am I saying, to Army of Donkness and everything else in between. These are going to be 20% off, only available this month, and then 50% off of all posters. Aaron, how was Vegas last week?
Oh, it was hot there too. I mean, it was I think
there's just no vegetation to burn out there, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But it was a fun week. It seemed like Vegas was really quiet up until about Thursday. I was talking to the different Uber drivers there, and they were saying it was just the city was kind of dead for the first bit of the week, at least. They said basically after July 4th, they feel like there was maybe a July 4th hangover. Not a lot of people were coming to visit. But as the week went on, you started to see more and more people come out of the woodwork, and it was it was a Conor fight week, but minus the Irish people. I didn't see any. I saw Irish flags. I don't know if they were brought there by people from Ireland, but it seemed like the typical Conor crowd that we were accustomed to back in the olden days, as one would say. during Conor's prime were probably not as present. But I mean, it did the gate record. A lot of big hitters in attendance for the card, and of course, we saw what happened in the main event.
Very quickly, before we get to topic number one, I didn't put this in the rundown, but I do think it's important to at least touch on very, very quickly. The numbers came out yesterday for the McGregor card. So it's interesting, right? We don't have the worldwide numbers, which again would not include Paramount Plus anyway, because, depending on how you get your TV in parts of Asia, you would get it from maybe regular cable or, but just speaking about the Paramount Plus side, the overall total North and South America, basically the Western Hemisphere, was just a little bit shy of the UFC White House card, but the peak concurrent within the United States actually beat the White House card. Your reaction to some of these numbers?
Yeah, those are massive numbers. And I mean, the only downside, of course, is what happened in the main event, because I'm sure that's where the concurrent number was. And a lot of people are tuning in. Like, I always tell the story about my sister watching the last fight that McGregor had against Poirier, and he gets injured and the fight ends. And she texted me. My sister never watches the UFC. And she texted me at the end. She goes, "That's it?" So I think a lot of people that don't really understand how this works think that maybe there's like more to it than what we saw, and they have higher expectations, or they don't really know what to expect. And then something like that happens, and they're like, "Well, I just tuned in for whatever, a 69-second fight where a guy gets injured and barely any strikes are landed. Is this what the sport is?" And I mean, obviously, we know that that's not the case. But if you're somebody who has never watched it before, it's a little bit different than watching. You look at the concurrent numbers for the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl, you're getting a football game and you're getting a halftime show. Like you know what to expect. For people that have never watched the sport before, I think it's confusing for a lot of them.
I will say also too, it just ends up being kind of the way that it's gone. But if you think about Kane versus JDS on Fox, even Ronda recently on Netflix, or this one, or Cejudo versus Dillashaw for the first fight on ESPN Plus. All of these attempts to, I mean, some of these are just, not necessarily attempts to set the record, but at least in some of these cases where you thought, wow, some new ground might be able to be reached, all of these main events ended super fast. So like if the Rousey main event went 5 rounds, what would the number be? If the Conor main event had gone 5 rounds, what would it be? I guess you got more of that with the White House card. It went for full 4. So, credit to it. But I just mean, there's been a bunch of these scenarios where you got a high number, and you just know it could have been much higher than that had the bout gone differently. But it just keeps happening this way,
Yeah, because the buzz will keep generating. Oh, hey, are you watching this right now? That sort of thing. If the fight is just an all-out war for the first round and it continues, that's where you can kind of piggyback on that momentum. At the same time, you have to look at those numbers from the UFC standpoint and say, well, regardless of injury, that was a real success. They might miss out on some viewers that they could hang on to for future events. But at the same time, like, those numbers are just absolutely massive.
No. They're great numbers. I don't mean to suggest otherwise. I just mean it's got to be a little frustrating for them too, because they're probably looking at it being like, wow, we're so happy with these numbers. And at the same time, it like could have been a lot higher still, just the difficulty of, I guess, fight promotion or the way things go in MMA. All right, let's do this. Topic number one. Let's kick things off, if we can, with where I think the most important story of the weekend starts, which is not UFC 329 from last week, but UFC Oklahoma City coming up here in front of us. And I got to tell you, I freaking love this main event. Now, that is not me necessarily saying that I think it's going to be action-packed from beginning to end. But the reason why I like it, Aaron, is because of what is on the line here. The stakes seem to me pretty clear. DDP needs redemption bad, and he needs it, as you watch the face-off here, in the particular kind of dimension that Usman can provide, like the challenge to his wrestling. And then, of course, on the other side, Usman is chasing a chance at, frankly, some version of MMA immortality by getting gold in a second division. Now, he wouldn't get it by winning this fight, but that's certainly the effort that he is looking at. So let's take this one fight at a time, or one fighter, I should say, at a time. First, I want to kind of talk about maybe do you share my assessment of how good this fight is? And then B, I want to talk about the DDP side and what you think might happen here in the event of a loss.
Yeah, it's a great fight, and kind of a weird fight because you don't really know what to expect. But if we can look at the Usman that fought Khamzat Chimaev a while back at 185 pounds, like, he looked great in that division. I was surprised he didn't just stick around at 185 pounds, but now that he's back, I expect him to stay at 185 pounds, win or lose. And with Dricus, I mean, he has sat out almost a year, And it looks like it's to his benefit because now Sean Strickland's the champion and he has 2 wins over Strickland. So if he ends up getting a win, I think that a Strickland versus Du Plessis trilogy fight is more marketable than what would be an Usman, an Imavov against Strickland fight. And I know that Strickland has fought Usman before, but I think that looking at how long ago that was, it was 170 pounds. I don't know if people put too much stock into that. That being said, I think the stakes for Dricus are just absolutely massive in this fight. Whereas with Usman, I think a win over Dricus certainly puts him right up there at the top, but I'm not sure if you would supplant a guy like Imavov who has so many wins at middleweight against Strickland. That said, Strickland has fought Imavov before. Usman technically has that win over Strickland, so maybe from name value, Usman could creep his way into a title shot. So again, the stakes for this fight for both of these men are extremely high.
All right, so let's stay with DDP here for the beginning of the analysis. You know, prior to the Khamzat fight, it wasn't like anyone thought, oh, wow, he's got the best takedown defense in the division, but certainly no one thought it was especially vulnerable. And now I think obviously following the loss to Khamzat, and again, it was 5 rounds of just being unable to do much of really anything. The best offense that DDP got in that fight, Aaron, was in round 5 when referee Mark Goddard stood him up. You know, it was when they reset the action is when you kind of got the most there. How much of this was just DDP hadn't been tested sufficiently? And then I guess the second part of my question would be how much ground can he cover to shore up these deficiencies between the end of that Khamzat fight and where we find ourselves tomorrow?
Yeah, I spoke to DDP this week, and his explanation for why he performed the way he did against Chimaev is somewhat baffling, honestly. And he's been saying it on multiple interviews, which is like, oh, I expected Chimaev to be a warrior. This is a guy who talks about smashing guys. I didn't expect him to take me down and hold me down and just use positional control to win a championship. I just didn't believe that that's something he would do. It's like, well, you kind of have to look at every single possibility in MMA if you're going to be defending your championship. If he's going to find a hole to exploit against you and basically neutralize you to the point where you can basically land no offense, he's going to do that. This is this is championship stakes, a lot of money on the line, because if you become a champion, your salary tends to go up quite a bit. I think that he was foolish in kind of overlooking that being a particular path to victory for Khamzat. And if that is the case, and he was thinking that Chimaev was going to at least engage with him on the feet for some of the fight, I think he needs to, look at, put that in the rearview mirror. And for this particular fight against Usman, expect that Usman's going to try to wrestle him for 5 rounds and basically just have a game plan for how you're going to keep the fight on the feet. Because if the fight's on the feet, I think Dricus can hang with just about anybody at middleweight, and he's proven that time and time again. But we now see a major deficiency in his game. Usman has a strong wrestling pedigree. So I think he's got to go into this fight thinking that Usman's going to be trying to take him down for 5 rounds and for 5 minutes of those rounds and figure out a way to stop that. Because if not, Usman can do that and should do that.
Did he, in your interview, acknowledge that his wrestling just wasn't up to par? I mean, it's one thing to be like, oh, I wasn't anticipating him to fight that way. Okay, I mean, I can, on some level, I can appreciate that. But that obviously is not the core problem. What else did he say in terms of his own responsibility to improve?
Yeah, he said that it was a major hole in his game. He acknowledged that there was work to be done in that department, and talked about how the year off kind of helped him be able to be a little bit more laser focused on that area of his game. So I don't think that he's writing it off as a fluke or writing it off as, Chimaev not fighting the way that he necessarily thought that he would fight. He knows that he needed to do a better job of avoiding the takedown. And I also think against a guy like Usman, who's not really a volume wrestler, it does play a little bit more to his strengths for this particular matchup.
Okay. I will tell you though that not your answer, but his answer to you, it's a little red flaggish. I mean, ultimately, if he is training to improve the wrestling and there's enough of a difference made, then I suppose all's well that ends well. But if your answer to the or one of your answers to the problem of what happened to DDP in the Khamzat fight is that Khamzat didn't create enough space trying to land more dominant shots, it's like if your plan to get up, I mean, yes, you do need to plan for when you're on the ground. If your guy has, both hands together and they release the grip, this is a moment to move. And if they create a lot of space by changing their posture and then, again, removing grip to launch a punch, yes, these are actually very, very important windows. But like, there's a whole level of defense long before that ever becomes a relevant scenario. And I got to say, if you're kind of like counting on your defense to arrive in those positions, you're just abandoning layers of defense that are, I would even argue, more important than that one, although I recognize that is. Do you have any questions about his judgment related to these? Like what it's going to take for him to win? I don't mean, Aaron, that he doesn't try hard and that he doesn't have desire, but rather, kind of counting on parts of the fight game that can be low percentage, or to bare minimum, you are at the mercy of their willingness to engage in those weapons versus defining the terms of the defense yourself.
I have major questions about it, Luke, because I mean, if you're going into a fight with Khamzat Chimaev and you're like, I didn't expect him to wrestle that much. Like, have you been like, do you watch tape on your opponents? Do you know how Khamzat has fought in the past? What have Khamzat's best win conditions been? Because Khamzat's best win conditions have never been on the feet. I mean, I think it doesn't take a scholar to determine the best way for Khamzat Chimaev to beat you is to just use his motor, wrestle you, and control you. Because we also had questions about Khamzat's cardio over the course of 5 rounds and whether he could hold up in a fight against a high-volume guy like Dricus. And the best way to do that is to make sure that the fight is on the ground, not exert that much energy, hold him down, and make his life miserable. And that's what Khamzat did. And I just don't know how you couldn't come into that fight not at least thinking that could be the game plan. Like, you might not think that is the game plan, but you have to at least put in the work to stop takedowns at all costs, because that's Khamzat's absolute best path to victory. And I would argue that it's probably Usman's best path to victory as well. Even though Usman's a solid striker, he certainly isn't a one-punch power knockout artist. And I think that if those holes have not been cleaned up, Usman will find a way to take advantage.
Let's one more time play the face-off if you can. Look at what do you make of the size difference here?
Big size difference. DDP used to fight at 170. The thing that first stuck out to me about this video is, why is there nobody in the middle? Look how close Dricus is to him. Look how close his hand is to Usman. They've got nobody there to separate them in case something goes wrong. Now, these two guys are gentlemen of the sport. Like, it would be kind of out of character for them to go after each other, especially when there's, been really very little war of words. But I think that the size is going to make a difference. That said, I think Usman has never been somebody that would be, his game isn't necessarily predicated on having a size advantage. It never really was at welterweight, and I don't think that at middleweight it'll hamper him that much.
I'll be curious, not so much for Usman's cardio, which I think all of us would agree is not an issue. At least it never has been an issue. I don't suspect it would start now. But that I wonder how much he might get offensively muted by just going up against a guy who's hard to maneuver. Like you mentioned, DDP used to be a middleweight, at welterweight, Khamzat too. And to me, Khamzat's a little bit his strength is kind of outsized, but his athletic profile is a little bit more manageable in that regard. I just kind of wonder how much it might dull what Usman tries to do. So let's turn the attention to him if we can here. I mean, on some level, right, Aaron, he's playing with house money here. He already is, in my opinion, the second best welterweight of all time. He certainly was a decorated champion by any measurement. And here he is trying for a late one. It does seem improbable. I don't think a loss here. I mean, I guess if he gets, viciously KO'd, there'd be something to say about like guys who tried to become double champs and didn't. But, the upside is enormous. Is there a noteworthy amount of downside that I'm not seeing?
Not really. I mean, he'd be 1-4 in his last 5, and I'm not sure where he would go from here. But like you said, his legacy is pretty much already in stone. He is the second greatest welterweight of all time, in my opinion, as well. And I'm not even sure who you would argue might have a better resume than him at welterweight outside of GSP. So I think that him playing with house money, I hope that he's going into this fight thinking that way, because I think that will help alleviate some of the pressures that you would have in trying to say, hey, I need to become a double champion before it's all said and done. perhaps he probably should have tried to go and do that earlier in his career. I think he's 39 now, so not exactly the best timing to try to become a double champ. To win a championship as you creep closer to 40 is highly unlikely at this level of MMA. But I do think that for Usman, a loss here is certainly not going to do too much to his legacy. If anything, it's at a different weight class than the one where he established his incredible resume. And I think it basically just shows the limitations of how much more he can do in the sport.
I by the way, I completely agree about like trying to do this at 40. That's so difficult. Someone on my live chat asked me this question yesterday, and it was so hard to fathom. I don't think I gave a very good answer. Namely, it's like, what would you say about Usman? And again, please understand, this is highly speculative. But if he was able to get this win, and he was able to beat Strickland, right, and I know he beat him at 170, but we're talking a new scenario for the title. Like what this would mean for his legacy. And the answer is obviously it would boost it to an extraordinary degree. But I actually want to make another point about it, Aaron, which is that like part of what happened when he stalled out at welterweight was that Edwards kind of figured his game out. He had a way to either neutralize the takedown, counter the takedown, or stop the takedown altogether. Like there was just some combination of all of it. I'm not even talking about the second fight, the third fight too, breaking grips and not letting him have it. Like he figured out his offensive system. I didn't see a new offensive system against Buckley as dominating as that win might have been, certainly from the wrestling perspective. I guess the point I'm trying to make is it's not like anything new was added to his game. So, or not much of anything new. So if he's able to go up a weight class at this advanced age without some kind of grand reformation in his game and just capture the middleweight title, I'm not even sure what you would call something like that. I mean, yes, it would be an enormous achievement. I'm not trying to diminish it if such a thing were to happen in any respect, but it just seems so improbable that I have a hard time conceptualizing the sporting significance of such an eventuality.
Yeah, if he becomes a double champion, I think you have to give him his flowers as one of the all-time greats.
Sure.
If at age 40, he can figure out, I don't know if he'll be 40 by the time he challenges, if he ever challenges for the title, because at 39, you have to expect that would be the probability. But I think that if he can capture a second title at age 40, that would be a massive accomplishment. I know you're talking about the lack of refinements to his game, but his game took him very far as is. He's still training at a great camp, out in Denver. You see him training with Justin Gaethje. You see him training with what's the gentleman's name is fighting Usman Nurmagomedov, who I'm forgetting? I don't know. Archie Colgan. Archie Colgan looks like a great fighter. And Trevor Whitman finds ways to win fights. He's a great coach. So I think that beating a DDP less than 1 year removed from being the champion, that in and of itself would be a massive check mark to add to his resume, because I think that DDP, if he still is able to fight like he did prior to the Khamzat fight, he's a high-level championship fighter in a division where you could argue he's one of the best middleweights of all time. So to get that sort of a win, I think would be super impressive.
I mean, that would be like Gaethje winning. How old is Gaethje? 37, something like that?
Yeah, I think he's turning 38 later this year.
Okay, so technically when he won it, he was 37, although on the older side of it. We're talking worse injuries and more years past that, up a weight class. Like Gaethje won it in his native weight class at 55. And now, granted, Usman had been champion at welterweight for a long time, which was his native weight class. But again, it's to go up in weight without really changing your game and then just take a title off of those guys. That would be insane. That would be actually very, very difficult to even put into words, because it would be so utterly monumental. Now I'm looking at the odds here. I never brought him in at the top of the show. We should bring him in now. Don't know if he's sober, but I know he's here. Long Island Luke. Long Island, our friends at DraftKings have the odds on this one, minus 230 for DDP, plus 190 for Usman. How do you see those lines? What does that tell you about where the betting value is, but also how they see this matchup?
I think that's perfectly accurate of a line, because I am intrigued enough to take Usman, but I also feel like DDP probably wins, so I'm kind of torn on it. As far as value, I think the best bet on this fight is the Usman plus 13.5 spread bet, Luke. That just means one judge, if it goes the distance, one judge has to give Usman 1 round. That's it. or he could win outright, or he could win multiple rounds. Doesn't matter. But either way, him plus 13.5 is only minus 165. I'm a plus money guy, so I would parlay that. But still, I feel like he's a live dog here. But at the same time, I'm picking DDP to win. So
I see you're nodding your head, Aaron. You share this analysis?
The plus 13.5 certainly makes a lot of sense because
Yeah.
if this goes the distance, you'd have to imagine Usman would win at least one round. Usman has been finished once in his UFC career, twice in his career in general. Like I think that it would be, DDP is a crafty guy, but I think this fight likely does go the distance. And if it does, that plus 13.5, that's a nice. What's the number on that, Luke? Like, what are you getting?
minus 165. So
Yeah. So I mean, well, here's my question to you: do you think that is a better bet than over 3.5? I believe is like minus 185. So then the fight just needs to go halfway through the third round. Then you don't even need to rely on the scorecards, and you're getting a similar price.
I like that, but I'd be too nervous that I guess it would blow the spread bet out anyway, but I'm too nervous that Usman DDP would finish it in less than 3.5. But I guess, like I just said,
that would crush your Usman bet.
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know where I'm at with this fight. I took the over 2.5 officially in a parlay. I do think it goes a little long. I don't know if it goes the distance, but either way, I like that Usman 13.5. So
we didn't really get to it, Aaron. I guess before we move on from this, I do want to talk about it. Like, what happens if DDP just kind of gets? I mean, if he gets run over, it's obviously very bad. But what happens if he just loses here too, right? And again, loses in a scenario where the wrestling ended up being a decisive factor, even in Usman. It could be a hard, scrap, and he looks better than he did in the fight with Khamzat, but nevertheless, it ends up being, a really, really a bit of Achilles heel for him. What kind of damage to his stock does this portend?
Yeah, it would be time to leave South Africa and train somewhere else if that's going to happen, because if you look at his middleweight run, there aren't a lot of great wrestlers that he went through. Like maybe Robert Whittaker is the best wrestler, who doesn't even use his wrestling all that much in his fights. Unless I'm forgetting somebody, there aren't a lot of great wrestlers just generally at 185 pounds. So if the two guys with high wrestling credentials are able to beat him in that way, I think it's going to expose a major hole in his game that would absolutely need to be cleaned up somehow, because everybody would know the code at that point in time. Wrestle. Find a way to get him on his back, and he's not going to get up. He's going to be like a fish out of water. But previous to Chimaev, he was able to get up when he was taken down. He's always been, pretty slippery in that sense. And I don't know if Usman's wrestling is as conducive to control as Chimaev's is. I guess we'll find out tomorrow. But I think it certainly would expose a massive hole in his game that he would need to spend a lot of time on cleaning up, because that would show that he kind of got lucky in terms of middleweight matchups, and not necessarily lucky, but middleweight again doesn't have a ton of high pedigree wrestlers in the division.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be devastating. I mean, not the kind of thing you couldn't come back from, but yeah, it'd be super, super bad. I want to say this, like, the keys to victory for me in this one, I think one of the, there's many ones you could point to, and how they match up in the stand-up, I would lean towards like sort of just the size and the unpredictability of what DDP does to give him some advantages there. But I also think, Khamzat, Usman could prove tricky on the feet, especially as the fight goes long and he settles into a rhythm. But I think for me, if I had to say, Aaron, what's the one big sort of X factor for you, or one big thing that will decide how this fight goes? For me, I'm going to point to whether this fight is able to be pushed to the fence by Usman. Even if Usman can't get the takedown there to stall out the guy, to land big shots and then break away, or to set up his offensive takedown system, Usman has always been an MMA wrestler where the fence was a really, really, really key component. If he can't ever get the fight there, obviously that does not necessarily mean he cannot win, but I think it substantially reduces his chances. By contrast, Aaron, I think if he is consistently able to push DDP to the fence and begin to, work whatever the offensive system ends up being in those particular exchanges, I think it dramatically ups his possibility. What do you see as one of the fault lines on whether this bout will be won or lost for either competitor?
Yeah, I mean, further to what you said, I think the tough part for Usman in that sense is that you've got a bigger, more physical guy in front of you, and a guy who typically likes to roll downhill like a snowball. Like, DDP isn't the type of guy that gets pushed back by just about anybody. He's a guy that moves forward all the time. So I think that your win conditions for Usman make a lot of sense. The big question for me is like, can he do that? Because we know how dangerous DDP is when he's coming forward. And you almost need DDP to go full DDP, come towards you, pivot, and then have him up against the cage because he's been going forward with that sort of momentum that we're used to. I think that the volume is going to be a big factor for DDP if he can land big striking volume and frustrate Usman. But that being said, I think that he would need to stuff takedowns in order to employ that sort of a game plan. So I think it is as simple as, can he stop the takedowns? If DDP can stop the takedowns, I think this fight is his to lose. I don't think that on the feet, Usman's going to have too much for him. And we've seen how good DDP is on the feet and how weird and janky he is on the feet. And I'm not sure that that's something that Usman has ever dealt with, not to mention that he's got a big guy at 185 pounds doing that to him. So I think you outlined the win conditions for Usman. I think on the flip side, the win conditions for DDP is to operate in open space, stay off the cage, like you said, and just land as much volume as possible to frustrate Usman.
He can throw volume. That is, to your point, on the feet. He has been good about that. He honestly was kind of or I should say a hugely important factor in the wins over Strickland was just his ability to work in a lot of these capacities. And I do think that could save him here in the end. I will say, if you want to hazard a guess, listen, I don't have no fucking idea who's going to win. I just do this for fun. I'm gonna take a flyer on Usman. I kind of wonder if he might be able to get this done. I realize it's uphill. I realize he's not the favorite. I realize DDP is bigger, and I certainly do not, think that this is some kind of out of reach opportunity for DDP. But I don't know, man. Until I see him improve on that level, I'm gonna stick with the tried and true. What about you? What's your prediction for this one?
I would lean DDP. I think that DDP wins this fight 65 to 70% of the time. I'm not sure what the odds translate to, but I think they would probably be in that area code. I don't see that many good win conditions for Usman outside of the takedown. And over the course of 5 rounds, he's going to have to land consistent takedowns in order to win the fight. I know he could win a decision by winning 3 of the 5, but I just don't see him getting the win here against Usman. I think you're talking about a peak Khamzat Chimaev in tip-top shape, who is able to chain wrestle, and has better knees than Usman. I mean, Usman's knees have been an issue, and I think that has precluded him from shooting as often as he did early in his career. I just think at 38 years old or 39 years old for Usman, I think it's a bit of a bridge too far.
With that in mind, let's go to topic number 2. Let's turn our attention to the rest of this UFC Fight Night Du Plessis versus Usman card. So my read on this is like, I actually think that the main card has a fair amount of value to it. And actually there's at least one fight on the prelims that I'm really excited about. But in general, I think this is a little top heavy for me. Main card, I feel like, is pretty good. Here you can see it. We already talked about the main event. You have Jared Cannonier versus CLD in the co-main. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Chase Hooper, by the way, who missed weight on his first attempt. We're waiting to see how that goes on the second one, taking on Mitch Ramirez. Tabitha Ricci taking on Fatima Klein. I freaking love that fight. Tommy McMillan, one of the biggest donks in the sport, taking on Alberto Montes. We'll talk about that in just a second. Let's just stick with the co-main event here. Is it safe to say the UFC is trying to send 42-year-old Jared Cannonier, who I think is 1-3 in his last 4, out to pasture by pairing him up with what can only be described as a surging CLD?
You know what? I don't think so. I actually think that this is them putting an extremely stingy middleweight veteran up against Christian Leroy Duncan to see what he has. Because like last February 2025, at least, he got a win over RoboCop. Cannonier is still tough as nails. And against MVP, he still looked good in that fight. We haven't really seen Cannonier look bad, really. I think that against Kyle Bohalio, he just kind of got outclassed. And you could say the same for Imavov. And he did really well against Imavov as well in parts of that fight. I think Cannonier, we have not yet seen him look washed. And I think that when you put him against Christian Leroy Duncan, like, this is a massive litmus test for CLD. And maybe I give Cannonier a little bit too much credit, but I just haven't seen enough to say that Cannonier is done. I think that we've seen him continue to have success against tough opponents. You say he's 1-3 in his last 4 losses to MVP in what was a close fight. Lost to, like, again, the top middleweight in Bohalyo and a number one contender in Imavov. Like, these aren't losses that you need to be particularly ashamed of. And then the 2 fights prior to that, win over Marvin Vettori and win over the current champ in Sean Strickland by split decision. And I thought that Cannonier won that fight. So I still think that Cannonier has something left in the tank. And if he does, I think he's going to be able to test CLD. I think CLD's looked great, but we haven't really seen how he can do against somebody who does have some sort of grappling proficiency. And at times we've seen Cannonier have that. So I want to see what CLD has here. I think that he's definitely the rightful favorite. He is surging. And the type of fighter that we have seen Cannonier have problems with lately are those kind of long, rangy strikers that can connect at the end of their punches, like MVP. And I think CLD is almost like a tankier version of MVP. So in a 3-round fight, I certainly favor CLD here, but I don't think that this is them trying to put Cannonier out to pasture so much as it's giving CLD a really strong test in the middleweight division.
I actually agree with this analysis, which is why I need Long Island Luke to help me out here. I think the point that Aaron makes about, like, yes, is Jared Cannonier older? Yes. Is he undefeated? No, he has been defeated, and it's been a lot of them recently, although, to Aaron's point, against really top guys. And he has a win over RoboCop in there. He has a win, or they indicated Sean Strickland previously, and Marvin Vettori. But the odds on this one don't speak to that at all, Long Island. Jared Cannonier plus 285. Ready for this? CLD minus 360. Brother, they're not giving him much of a shot at all here.
They do seem wide, but I feel like it's a momentum thing, man. I feel like Jared Cannonier's getting older, as you guys said. CLD looked pretty good. Granted, he has like multiple spinning back fists, which I feel like, not that they're fluky, but those always make me worried. Like, okay, you're landing spinning back fists. How many guys is that going to work on, kind of thing? But either way, he looks damn good. How about this for a bet on this? Took it earlier in the week. Fight does not go the distance, plus 110. Plus money on this fight to not go the distance. You're getting an old Jared Cannonier, no offense. Majority of his wins do come by finish, though. And CLD, 10 of his 14 wins by knockout. Like, I could totally see a world CLD knocks out Jared Cannonier. I could totally see a world where Jared turns back the clock and is like, listen here, CLD, I'm going to teach you a lesson. You know, either way, this fight to not go the distance is all I'm rooting for here. But value.
Aaron, I'll say for Duncan, this is, you know, you want to prove to the matchmakers you belong in the upper echelon of the middleweight division. You get a nice, and again, hard to do, but you get a nice, clean, let's say, great stoppage win over a guy like Jared Cannonier, and brother, you're off to the races at that point.
100%. And CLD, you know, his resume isn't fantastic in terms of who he's beaten, but if you look at the way that he's won his 2 most recent fights, the one against Dolidze, although you could have argued he probably should have gotten a finish in that one, he was just outclassing Dolidze the whole way. And Marco Tulio, who, when those two were matched up, it was kind of a prospect versus prospect type matchup. But at the same time, like, he doesn't have a name like a Cannonier on his resume. His best win's probably Dolidze, and Dolidze was kind of like leg lock or bust in that fight because he was just so thoroughly outclassed on the feet. I just think that when you look at Cannonier, he's just a much more well-rounded fighter. Again, 42 years of age. Can he be the guy that's this young, this talented? I have a little bit of trouble seeing it, but I do know that he's going to be tough, and I do know that he's going to be able to push CLD in this fight.
I love this fight. I cannot wait to see it. So it brings us now to the next one, which is, this one is, I got to tell you, a little strange for me. Not the pairing per se that Chase Hooper is fighting Mitch Ramirez. By the way, they both missed Long Island. They both missed weight just now.
No, not his opponent, Ezra Elliott, who is the first fight of the night. And he also took the fight on like 5 days.
Yes, he took it on crazy short notice. Yeah. But okay, but hold on. Chase Hooper waited in a second attempt and still missed?
No, he did not attempt a second attempt, but he officially missed weight, 157 and a half. Okay. And Ezra also missed it. Yeah, the weigh-ins are done. Everyone made weight besides Ezra Elliott and Chase Hooper.
So, okay, hold on. I'm confused. They're not gonna weigh in again.
No. According to, they've officially missed weight. According to, I don't know if they only had an hour window and it ended at 11. I don't know. But
Aaron, I got to tell you, Chase Hooper's young. I realize that there's some limits to his game. Personally, I feel like even though he's grown, there's some limits to the physicality I think he needs to be able to compete at this level. Nevertheless, he seemed like and does seem like a student of the game, like a pro. He's on a losing streak, and then he misses weight. I have to tell you, I am very surprised by this. What do you make of him missing weight here?
Yeah, it's very concerning. I mean, he was a featherweight prior to this, and I know he's grown into his body and he's a bigger guy now, but he just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy that's that would miss weight at this weight class, at least. I know that it was a really difficult cut for him, so makes you wonder whether something's wrong with Chase Hooper and what precluded him from continuing to cut weight in order to make it. But yeah, that's doesn't seem like something that would be, it's not characteristic of him, I guess is the best way to put it.
Maybe he's injured, like maybe he can't do the road work because he's taking this fight injured, and that could be a factor, which also would change things. Long Island, if again, we're just speculating. We do not know why he missed weight or, whatever the case may be. But I'll say this, they had Hooper, and I think in a world where he's healthy, I understand these odds, but they got him at minus 380. They got Mitch Ramirez at plus 300. Bro, like, should these lines move now? Like, how do you evaluate the value?
An injury, like that's a sure thing that he missed weight. It's also, this cut isn't going great. Let me just take the 20% and not stay hydrated kind of thing. And if that's the case, he has a clear advantage, even more of an advantage. If anything, the odds should increase in his favor. But dude, his opponent is winless in the UFC, been knocked out both times. Chase Hooper been finished in his last 2 fights as well. But I do feel like this is a bounce back Chase. And if you don't win this, I mean, there's really questions to be asked, but I'm not as concerned as you guys. I will monitor those lines for the next 24 hours and see which way they start leaning. And that'll maybe give us a better idea of if it's possible that he's hurt or whatever, but I definitely favor him to win this fight regardless.
I get almost like a loser leaves town vibe from this fight. I mean, I don't think the UFC would cut Chase Hooper off a third loss, but I got to say, if he does have a third loss and it's bad and you missed weight on the way and it's not injury related, the stakes for this one got a little bit higher, didn't they?
It's contender series season.
Yeah.
Contracts to be handed out. They're cutting a lot of fighters. Right now we saw Michel Pereira got cut recently. It seems like this is the time where they trim some of the fat off the roster. And I think that calling this a loser leaves town match, especially with Chase missing weight, is certainly not speaking out of school. Chase Hooper has had lots of ups and downs in his career. He came in at, I think it was 17 years old or 18 years old fighting on Contender Series, very young. We've seen flashes of brilliance from him. And I think this is a fight that he should win. And if he loses this fight, I think that would be a massive red flag for him going forward in terms of what his upside in this sport is. This is a fight that he should just absolutely win. It's not a disrespect to Mitch Ramirez. It's just there's levels to this game. And we've seen Chase Hooper do things at, operate at a higher level than we've seen Mitch Ramirez operate at in his career thus far.
One person whose ascendancy in the women's game has been, I think, a bright light has been Fatima Klein. Now, she's still very early into it, but the early returns, they give one a lot of hope. She's a minus 45 favorite against Tabitha Ricci here. What do you make about the timing of this pairing? I think Klein has really high upside. And nevertheless, Ricci is the toughest test by far that Klein has faced, an experienced veteran at this point, a good athlete, someone who's seen a lot of really, really tough competition within the octagon. Whether she won every time is a separate consideration, but just, somebody who definitely has a respectable degree of ability and certainly a lot of veteran experience. They have obviously, odds or otherwise, UFC has a lot of belief in Klein. I share most of that, but is it a little too much too soon, do you think, Aaron Bronsteter?
No, perfect timing. A win over Angela Hill puts her right into that area where she should be fighting top 10 fighters. She's undefeated at strawweight. And I think that when she was on the regional scene, it was very clear that she was an ascending prospect. Trains with Aaron Blanchfield and looks to be, I think, a future champion. When she first came to the UFC, even though she lost in her debut to Jasmine Jasdavicius fighting up a weight class on short notice, I mean, those are pretty, it's a pretty tall mountain to climb in your UFC debut. But even in that fight, she fought Jasmine really tough. And I said to Jasmine after that fight, I think she's going to be a future champion, not in your weight class, but at strawweight. And Jasmine was like, yeah, she's really tough. So I think now is the time for her to get this sort of test and to start moving up that ladder.
I mean, this is grossly speculative, but the women's game, I think, in my opinion, I don't want to belabor all of its issues. So let's talk about the bright side. It could use an insurgent name who is young, has an exciting style, and is winning. Now, we're at the point, Aaron, where the rubber meets the road, but up to this point, it's been Klein. What is realistically possible here for her in terms of being someone that a broad swath of MMA fans could get excited about? Because again, it's not just that she wins, Aaron. It's that she wins and has a very, very fan friendly, and I would also argue technical style. Like, she checks a lot of boxes. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but at the same time, I don't want to deny what I'm seeing, which is this could be exactly what the game is needing at this moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. The women's weight classes do need an infusion right now of up and coming talent, and we're seeing some of them, like Luana Santos at bantamweight is young and she's doing really well. Denise Gomez is fighting Yan Xiaonan. I think she's an up and coming prospect as well in this 115-pound weight class. So we're seeing some of these up and coming fighters, but I think Klein right now is kind of the blue chip prospect that we need to see excel in these divisions. I think that right now is the time for her to make some noise. Strawweight seems kind of wide open to me. I don't know what's happening with Zhang Weili. We see that Jillian Robertson's getting the next shot at Mackenzie Dern. But I think if you put Fatima Klein against either of those girls, that she fares well. I don't see a big gap in talent right now in the strawweight division between, unless you're counting Zhang Weili, who I still think is probably a lot more talented than most of the people in this division. I do think that right now there's not a big gap between the champion and some of these other contenders.
All right. Well, we're headed right to Donkville as Tommy McMillan, who I do not think personally is very good, and I don't think he's ever going to be good, but he's going to car crash into you against Alberto Montes. The odds on this one, I think, are exactly right, Aaron, where, like, because McMillan is so offensive and because this is a sport where offense tends to matter more than defense, he just kind of forces his way to a win, but not without imperiling himself and making it very, very difficult along the way. Montes has a win over Ricky Turcios. Not much more to speak of in a UFC campaign. This one should be fun as long as it lasts, right? But I don't necessarily am like, oh, McMillan's the next big thing.
Yeah, and Montes, if you talk to anybody at the Goat Shed, that they all say that this guy is like, he's the new Darce Knight. This guy has just an incredible assortment of Darce chokes, anacondas, that if he can get you in that position, you're cooked. Now, the thing that Tommy McMillan has that I don't think a lot of people talk about is that he has a really strong wrestling pedigree. I believe he was a state champion in Montana. And he has that in his back pocket, which is kind of what allows him to be a bit reckless on the feet. We haven't really seen him use that wrestling just yet. He did on Contender Series against Magoyan, but I think that if he can mind his P's and Q's here and not get too reckless with the striking to a point where he's going to get into some sort of grappling scrambles and he can avoid those chokes, I think that he can still win this fight and should still win this fight, because I think that his striking is more refined than Montes. But Montes is very sneaky. So I think that the reason why these odds were kind of opened at even money is because Montes does have a pretty established bag of tricks that he can get going at any time. So McMillan, this is a much tougher challenge for him than his first fight against Zucchini, who was coming off a 3-year layoff. That was more of a layup. This one, I think, is going to be a much tougher challenge.
There's some other good fights on this card. On the prelims, although again, I think that the main card is where the real value is. That most of these ones on the prelims are just kind of diggity donk versus riggedy Rick. But the one that starts it off now, again, we just mentioned Ezra Elliott missed weight, although he took the fight on super short notice, 7-0, taking on a name that I hope MMA fans are going to remember. Down in the middle of your screen there, Damian Anderson. Damian Anderson is a legit world-class black belt. Now, he hasn't necessarily won all of the biggest tournaments, but I bought his Ashigarami series, and I thought it was just brilliantly explained. This is a guy out of B Team, which is now Simple Man Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a very, very modern game, and by that I mean he can wrestle up. He's obviously very technical everywhere. He can find the back, and if you just watch some of his other fights, he can throw hands, again, for a guy who's 5-0, coming from jiu-jitsu anyway, pretty well. Good athlete, young enough to, like, I'm I don't know if going to the UFC right now, Aaron, is the best call for his development, but I'll just say this is so many guys come over from jiu-jitsu and they're guys with gi grips and then they're pulling guard. That is not this guy. That is not this guy at all. Not afraid of contact, phenomenal athlete, great team, absolutely just the kind of jiu-jitsu you would need for MMA. I'm pretty high on what he could potentially do here. What to you on this card stands out?
Well, before I get to that, I will say on the flip side of that Damian Anderson matchup, Ezra Elliott trains at MMA Lab. He's training with some of the best guys. You've got your Jose Delgados. O'Malley trains there from time to time. Bautista trains there. And he's a legit 45er. Damian Anderson typically fights at bantamweight. So I understand why this is a closely lined fight. Ezra Elliott I think he's also a jiu-jitsu black belt. Now, nowhere near the kind of caliber that Anderson is in terms of competition. But I think that Elliott should be the favorite in that fight, especially now that he's missed weight and he's going to be a lot bigger than a guy that typically fights at bantamweight. But one fighter I also want to point out is Anna Melisano. She's fighting against Dione Barbosa, and I've got a really difficult admission that I have to make, Luke, and I've got to come clean here. I still watch Tough. I've been watching the season of Tough, and she's on it. She lost. She lost her fight on Tough, but I don't think that's representative of how skilled she is. I actually think Anna Melisano is going to be a good fighter in the UFC. She's really long, solid, rangy striker, and she's like a plus 500 underdog against Dione Barbosa. I think she can win that fight. So keep your eye on Melisano. I'm surprised that she's that big of an underdog, as good as Dione Barbosa is. But to me, there are just a lot of really good fighters to watch. I think in terms of matchups, Jean-Paul Lebosniani against Seok Hyun Ko, who they call the Korean Tyson, but they should call him the Korean Khabib because all he's been doing really is wrestling and controlling guys. That's a really good fight. But the one that I have circled is the featured prelim, Austin Bashi against Jose Delgado. Two young, impressive fighters. Bashi more of a wrestling-based fighter, and Delgado great in open space. He's Benson Henderson's protege. An exciting fighter to watch. He hasn't had the best run so far, but he's shown flashes of brilliance, and I think that's an incredible prelim fight.
Long Island, what do we miss?
First of all, Aaron, great call on Jose Delgado. Also, the odds on that fight, pick them right now. So I think a lot of value on Jose Delgado. We already touched on this fight, but I just got to chime in about it. The Tommy McMillan, Alberto Montez fight. Okay, I saw Alberto Montez was a dog, and I said, oh, hell yeah, I'm taking that. Got him at plus 105. He is now plus 140. So I got burned on that line, but he's just growing as a dog. Why isn't it going closer? I feel like he's going to beat Tommy McMillan, and we're all going to be like, that guy's a fucking killer. That guy looks sick. Ricky Tercios is no easy out, and he dropped him. He clubbed and subbed him, dropped him before he got the Darce or Anaconda, whatever it was. Either way, I'm high on him. Looking forward to it. Otherwise, you guys kind of named all the other fights. Stuart Nickel, an Aussie fighting. He is winless, I believe, in the UFC. At least he's lost 3 straight, and he is a plus 700 underdog, but damn well I'm taking a spread bet on him. You gotta.
Let me ask you, Aaron, what is more disreputable, watching The Ultimate Fighter or contending that the Star Wars prequels are still good?
Well, I think the Star Wars prequels are horrible. So, I mean, I'm going to go with the Star Wars. I'm surprised. I think we've had this conversation. Like, none of them are good. Like, the Phantom Menace is terrible. The one after that is just a complete abomination that should just be erased from time. And the third one is, like, probably the best of the bunch and is not good. So, I mean, it's right. But I also think that we're old heads, and like there's like this kind of younger generation that grew up on those movies and have, when you watch stuff as a kid, you tend to hold it in like a higher regard. It's like part of your childhood. So like for us, the old school original Star Wars trilogy are like what we vibe with, and other people tend to vibe with. It's like people that like My Chemical Romance. Like I don't get it. Like I don't understand how you can listen to that and enjoy it. But like, if you listened to it when you were like 13, you kind of have this soft spot for it. So I think that's how you explain that. But those movies are just not good.
I think if you listen to My Chemical Romance at 13, you deserve to be bullied. I just want to say that out loud. I don't really care. All right. With that out of the way, let's go to topic number 3. The fights are still, by the way, we should just talk about this. Long Island, you can come in here on this one. The PFL returns to Texas. This is topic number 3. The PFL returns to Texas. which I thought was going to be on ESPN2, but no, it's actually going to be on ESPN proper. And they've got what I would consider to be a proper main event. Now, it's not the one that they wanted. What they wanted was the rematch between former champion Johnny Eblen and the guy who beat him, Costello Van Steenis. But Van Steenis was injured, and they couldn't make it happen on this timeline. So what they're doing is a rematch from the PFL versus Bellator card, which was between Johnny Eblen and Impa Kasanganay, and you can see them facing off here. They fought before. I kind of want to talk about this for just a second before we get to the actual fight itself. Aaron, okay. What do you want to call him? PFL CEO Jonathan Martin gets out publicly in a very rare display and says, hey, we're just not getting support from ESPN the way that we would have anticipated. And I don't know if this is necessarily a response to that. And I want to be clear about this too. Like, PFL often and almost always really is at the mercy of what ESPN needs from them. Hey, we don't need you on ESPN. We're going to put you in ESPN2. We don't need a main card start at 8. We need a main card start at 10:30, 11. And everyone's like, well, this makes no sense. Why is this happening? Okay, I understand all of these factors, but here we have a weekend where the PFL finally gets on ESPN and it still has to go head to head with the UFC. How can this situation be rectified?
Especially weird with the UFC having 2 off-prime events with the 2 weeks following this. I don't know how it can be rectified, honestly. I think that's up to John Martin to figure out, because he's got an extensive background in television and rights negotiations, and he's going to have to sort that out. But like, it is always weird being like, well, the PFL is being preempted by, women's softball. It's currently in the 7th inning, so we've got a tap dance for the next 20 minutes before we can go live on ESPN2. And that's not a good look for the PFL either. So I think they're going to have to sort this out in their next rights agreement. And for now, they've got to just deal with what they've got to deal with and continue to try to build their divisions and championships.
Well, I'll say this. The good news for PFL, it's not going to be hard to find them on Saturday night, right? You don't have – do I have the ESPN Plus extra special tier, or do I – you know what I mean? It's just going to be on regular ESPN. Okay, let's talk about the main event. I set it up before. It's actually a rematch. Johnny Eblen, 17-1, taking on Impa Kasanganay, who, I'm going to say this, man, if you watch that first fight, and it's available on YouTube if you guys haven't seen it or you don't remember it, buddy, Kasanganay gives him everything he can handle, at least through 3 rounds. Here is the scoring. 2 of the judges gave the round 1 to Johnny Eblen, which that was, not necessarily the way they would go. All 3 gave round 2 to Impa Kasanganay, and then in the end, Eblen rescued himself in that 3rd round, although, as you can see with the judge, Mark Collette, gave the fight ultimately to Impa Kasanganay. What is your takeaway from their first fight, Aaron, and also just how different this one could be?
That fight was super close, and you could have made a case that Impa won that fight. And right now, Eblen's a minus 600 favorite, which makes just no sense to me. I think that Kasanganay is going to give him all he can handle. And I was very surprised to see that the odds were as wide as they are. I believe this is a 5-round fight. This is for the interim title, if I'm not mistaken. I saw that that Dan Hardy was holding the belt in that square off. So, I mean, that does work more to the Johnny Eblen side. He's a wrestler. He's got better cardio, but Impa's tough, and he's got fight-stopping power. So I think that right now these odds are way off, and I think that this is the right fight to make with Costello Van Steenis out.
What was your takeaway from the fight about how Kasanganay matched up with Eblen?
I thought he was able to neutralize the wrestling at parts, and I just think that he has more power on the feet. So I think that for as long as this fight's standing, he's going to be dangerous, just like he is in every fight. I think that he's got a solid chance here, much better than the odds makers are giving him.
To your point, for those who missed it, on the feet, especially towards the end of the first, he really began to get loose. And in the second round, again, Kasanganay won across all 3 judges' scorecards. It's round 3. Eblen's kind of able to get back to the wrestling and go from there. This one will be 5 rounds. And by the way, not just 5 rounds and such that you care. This one's for the interim PFL middleweight championship. Winner of this is expected to unify ultimately against Costello Van Steenis, but it was a bit surprising in the end. Like, since the loss to Van Steenis, which again happened at the the last second almost, basically, in their first fight, do you detect any changes in Eblen? Did you see like a different way he speaks? Maybe up the tempo in his fights. He fought Brian Battle and beat the bags off of him. What have you seen from him as like a rebound effort following that very surprising and shocking last minute loss?
Well, I still see that he's fighting like he normally fights, like the Brian Battle fight. He dominated that fight. I'm sure that he's more inspired for this fight, and he's not going to let that same sort of thing happen, like what happened to Von Steenis last time, where he gets caught at the end. He's been training with Sean Strickland in Florida. He's been helping Strickland out by coming to Las Vegas for his fight. So I think he's going to ultimately be very prepared for this fight. And we've seen how talented Eblen is. I think a lot of people were shocked that he lost to Van Steenis, but I think Van Steenis is just an absolute stud. I think I'm excited to see that rematch if it does come to fruition, and if it doesn't, and Kasanganay wins, I think that's a great fight too. Those guys haven't fought each other before, and I think that Kasanganay's power against Van Steenis, can certainly test him as well. But I think that Costello Van Steenis might be the least talked about elite mixed martial artist in the world today. The way that this guy fights and the way that he's been improving, I think, has been something incredible to watch. And this middleweight division in the PFL is quite good.
What is it about Van Steenis you think people don't understand or underestimate?
I just don't think they talk about him enough, and maybe they haven't watched him. But when he's in there, his kickboxing is unreal. He now has added submissions and grappling to his game. His size for the division is massive. Like, he looks like he's a light heavyweight. He just has so many different weapons that make him such a joy to watch. And I think that if you haven't watched him fight, you need to go and check out some of his fights if you can find them online.
Dude, I'll say this too for Van Steenis. One of the things, I realize that he's not in this fight, but one of the very best things about him, dude, I cannot tell you, there is risk in every style, and there's risk in the style I'm about to highlight. But Van Steenis is just an opportunist. Like, partly he creates his own luck, and then partly he just waits for you to fuck up, and then he just latches on to any mistake, any kind of, like, he's always got an eye for where is the offense here? Like, where is the offense in this scenario? Where is the offense in that scenario? And the instant it reveals itself, he's jumping on it. And that can cost you too, right? Again, there's pluses and minuses to every style. But the thing that makes Van Steenis to me so remarkable is how good he is at spotting little tiny windows for what can ultimately end up being very decisive offense. Do you share that assessment?
100%. And I just think that the level that he's improved from fight to fight has just been so glaring. And I can't wait to see him fight again. Honestly, I think that he's somebody that if you matched him up against Sean Strickland, that would be a competitive fight, at the championship level. I really do believe that he is one of these guys outside the UFC that can make a lot of noise inside the UFC. That said, I did believe that about Patchy Mix also, and we saw how that went. But I love watching Costello operate in the cage.
Long Island, Johnny Eblen minus 660. Impa Kasanganay plus 420. Brother, how we betting this one?
You just answered it right there. He's plus 420. I'm riding with Impa Kasanganay, baby. Let's go.
I guess so, right? I mean, it's just too much value, especially if you think he's got a real legitimate shot. How bad would it be for PFL's efforts? I mean, one of the things that PFL needs, and I think you would agree with this, I got to say, I like Jonathan Martin. Of all the guys who have run this organization, he strikes me as the most locked on. He seems to understand what his role is, what his limits are, what his strengths are, what the PFL needs to do, and the kinds of things it does to need to build itself. I really like what he's doing. I got a lot of respect for the kind of campaign he's running here. But one of the things that PFL needs, I believe personally, Aaron, is rivalries. They need rivalries. They need part of signing Brian Battle. I did not think that he was like some kind of decisive figure to like lead a lengthy winning campaign. But dude, he's going to stir shit up and he's going to make people want to go after him. And I really feel like they need it. So I don't want to say, oh, it'd be bad if Impa Kasanganay wins. This guy's whole story has been about just, finding ways to do pretty incredible things, both in this organization and others. At the same time, though, the rivalry between Eblen and Van Steenis, I think, would be better for PFL's needs. Are they running a risk in making a fight? I realize the odds don't speak to that, but from your own personal assessment, is this a bit of a risky fight when they need to build compelling rematches or compelling rivalries?
I don't think so. I think that if you put the interim strap on Eblen, he ends up winning. It makes the fight even bigger. And I think that if Eblen loses, I think Impa Kasanganay against Costello Van Steenis is a great fight. So I think either way, they're going to end up with a solid championship fight. Now, you mentioned the rivalry aspect. I get it. You know, Costello upset Eblen in a fight that he was otherwise winning. There's unfinished business there. That being said, I feel like there's some unfinished business here because that fight between Eblen and Impa, the first time around was really close. So I think that this is the right fight to make, and I like that they're putting an interim title on the line for it. And when you talk about Martin, I think, you know, I like what he has to say, and I think he's a really solid interview, and he's making the rounds, and he's talking about the PFL, and right now they're in negotiations for the next TV deal and all that. The one thing that I worry about right now with the PFL is that I don't know what their vision is. I'm not exactly sure what they're trying to build, at least with Don Davis. They had the tournaments. Don Davis had this vision of the Champions League of MMA and building all these different regions. And I liked that vision because it was different. It was different from what other promotions are offering. It wasn't what the UFC is doing. I think that if the PFL is going to just try to be UFC light, it might work from a TV rights standpoint and you can make some money there. I just don't know if it's going to be good for the long term. I don't know what exactly they can do better than the UFC. I like the idea of going to underserviced markets. I think that they could build a stronghold in Dublin. Their events in France have been great. If they can find these kind of home markets for them that the UFC aren't capitalizing on, I think that makes a lot of sense for them in terms of live gate. But at the same time, I don't know how they're going to be able to compete with the UFC if they're just trying to be what the UFC is.
It's a tough way to find an identity. I will say this, they're trying to hold on to some of their premier talent. Blake Avignon reported that Dakota Ditcheva has signed a 2-fight deal with them, each fight, I should say, worth $1 million. I mean, it seems to me, Aaron, this is a no-brainer. She is easily one of the most exciting up-and-coming fighters, frankly, in all of MMA, but certainly on the women's side of the equation. She's one of the most important pieces of their talent roster. Your reaction to this news?
Well, it just kind of shows what they're up against, because how do you extract that sort of value back from Dakota Ditcheva? Like, it's one thing to say, hey, we've got this big star, but if you've got a 2-fight deal, my question would be, is there some sort of championship clause in there where we already know what her comeback fight is? If she fights again and wins the championship, is she going to be locked into another contract? Because if you're putting her on a 2-fight deal and you're paying her $1 million for each of these fights, and she ends up just going gangbusters and looking incredible and building up her profile, how does that benefit the PFL in the long term if she's going to end up being a free agent again after 2 fights? I worry that this is, again, one of the major pitfalls of being kind of a UFC competitor and doing the same thing as them, because ultimately, if you're just going to keep paying talent more money and they're just going to look to go to the UFC eventually anyways, like, could you have been better off taking that $1 million, signing some bigger free agents that already have some value in this name value in the space, and building up your divisions? Like, you could probably build up 3 divisions with what you could do with $1 million in the open market. That's the part about it that I don't understand, is like, I know they probably want to hang on to Ditcheva long term and build a promotion around her and generate some buzz. It's like everybody always says, they need to build more homegrown talent. Well, if they're building these homegrown talent, and then ultimately the homegrown talent just wants to go to the UFC anyways down the road, what value does that have? So that's, I think, the biggest hurdle right now, and the biggest challenge for John Martin and PFL brass is, like, if we're going to build these talent from the ground up like they have with Ditcheva, how do we keep her, and how do we make it convert to eyeballs and media rights money? And it's just a massive challenge, because I don't know the answer personally.
What would be a good home for them, you think?
I mean, Netflix would be a great home, but I don't see that being on the table.
No, but I mean, like both sides get value. Like, I can see the, however much they paid for the deal, whatever. But, like, does UFC bring value to Paramount? Clearly. Does Paramount bring value to UFC? You can understand why you can see the exchange. What's a good partner where the exchange makes sense?
I don't really know. I think that it's got to be a platform that wants to build up their portfolio in sports. And right now, it seems like Netflix isn't getting into that game of things that aren't just like big one-offs. We saw Amazon Prime try it with one championship, and that seems to have failed. So I'm not really sure exactly what they could do to. For the PFL, I think their best bet is to get something that has eyeballs. Like try to find a platform that people are going to be able to find you on, where you can promote and say, "Hey, we're going to watch this." Like even YouTube, I think would be like if YouTube was willing to pay them some money to put their events just on YouTube. You're trying to just build your audience, and I think that the more niche you get, like I've heard Fox Nation being mentioned as a potential home. Like how many homes is Fox Nation in, and how many people even know that they have Fox Nation as part of their plan? Like I think that them being on ESPN, at least you're going to be on in bars. There's going to be reach. I think that they've got to find somebody that's willing to pay them, but also they need to find something that has some solid reach, because if people are unable, like I know in Canada, they weren't even airing the events for a while. They finally have put them on YouTube for people to watch. Like if I'm covering the sport and I can't find your product and I'm trying to watch it and trying to, report on it and talk about it. Like if I can't, like you're already creating barriers of entry for people to find you. Like the less barriers of entry to me and the less money that it's going to cost for people to see your product, that's what I would gravitate towards.
Yep, it's a difficult proposition. It's a difficult situation. I will say, I don't know how this worked for anyone else watching, but I watched, let's say, the last two World Cup games, so the semifinals, right? So Argentina and England, and then France and Spain. And then I watched it on YouTube TV on 4K, the 4K channel that comes up, right? And then during the course of that game, whether it was like a hydration break or halftime, and I remember this distinctly at the end of the game, I saw ads for RAF on Fox Nation there. Now, again, this is not when the U.S. men's national team plays and you're getting like 18 million, 20 million or more watching. It's going to be a lot less than that, but it's still going to be a pretty big audience. So, I mean, it's not like the worst of all worlds if Fox really wanted to go in, but like Fox already kind of got out of it. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing where we're in a place where there's a lot of options and none of them are an obvious fit. I think that's the part for me that I struggle with for the PFL's future, ultimately.
Yeah, certainly. And I mean, if they could come up with something where they're on a streaming platform and then they can also stream on their own platform and then advertise whatever that streaming platform's other shows are, something along those lines, and find some sort of synergies there, I think that would be good for them. But right now, it feels like they're kind of in no man's land. And it's a real shame because the events that they put on are all very exciting and high level for the most part. And I just feel like if you're the thing that the UFC have done so well is they've built a culture around their brand where people watch the UFC because they feel like they're part of something. It's not just about like enjoying MMA. I think a lot of people watch the UFC because they're interested in the characters involved. They've almost built like a pro wrestling vibe around it where people care about what's going to happen and care about the progression as much as they care about what actually happens in the cage and the artistry behind mixed martial arts. And I think that's sort of the problem that the PFL have, is that I feel like the average mixed martial arts fan these days is like a UFC fan that doesn't care that much about the mechanics of the sport itself and what's happening in the cage. They care more about the result and the people that are generating those results and where they go. What's their linear trajectory? Whereas in the PFL, I feel like they've had some trouble building that.
It's just my personal belief, unless you have access to pay-per-view. I mean, I know we don't live in the era of pay-per-view, but the idea of pay-per-view headlining fighters, there really is not a whole lot you can do. And so we'll have to just see if there's industry changes, but short of that, it's just a very difficult position. That takes us, we have more MMA, but that takes us now to just a bit of boxing, although we stay with Paramount Plus here for just a bit in terms of some of the discussions we've had about other fights that are happening this weekend. Ryan Garcia, a man who loves the N-word like he loves few things, is going to defend his WBC welterweight title when he faces Conor Benn. This will be September 12th. Now, this is the interesting part about it all, Aaron. This is the fight poster here. The bout is airing on Paramount Plus. It's going to be at the T-Mobile Arena, big fight. There's a bunch of different things related to this going head-to-head with Noche, which we'll talk about in a minute. But first, this is what this means. ZUFFA Boxing is promoting a WBC world title fight. Not only that, they're doing it in conjunction. Look at the top there. Look at the top of the graphic here, left to right. That's the DAZN graphic, so it's going to be on Paramount Plus. I think there's a couple of countries where it's going to air on DAZN, but in general, it's Paramount Plus. Ring Magazine is kind of like the entity behind it. ZUFFA Boxing is I think the promoter on record here in this case. And then there's Golden Boy, brother. What does it mean that ZUFFA is working to promote a sanctioning body title with Oscar De La Hoya of all people?
I want to see what the dais looks like. Are we going to see Dana and Oscar on the same stage? Like this is what interests me about this as somebody who's kind of on the outside looking in for boxing. All the years of Dana taking shots at Oscar, and now he's kind of somewhat in business with Oscar. It's very confusing. I don't know how it's going to play out. I do think that the Ali Act not being expedited to getting passed is what is creating was it the WBA or WBO titles on the line? Like
BC.
WBC titles. There's all these sanctioning bodies. I don't know which one's which, but it's just a whole lot of confusion. But I'm very interested to see how it all looks at the end of the day.
I find this to be absolutely fascinating. I do think that what's happening here is probably a couple of things, right? One is they didn't get the Ali Act passed yet, and people have asked, like, what's the holdup there? I mean, there's a lot that's kind of happening on the Senate side, not so much in that particular committee, the Commerce and Science and whatever the full name of it is, but the Commerce Committee, essentially. Part of it is, like, you got to remember, like, there's so many things that are happening in the Senate, and there's always just really massive opportunity costs. If they have to focus attention on one thing, it takes away from the Senate's ability to more broadly lean into something else. So, for example, they were doing some hearings about the replacement for the Attorney General, and this went on for days and blah, blah, blah. Like that, it just ends up eating time before they can devote resources in other directions. So that's, I think, part of it, and they're just kind of in this place. I think the other part of it too, dude, is like, while they're waiting for that to get figured out, or whatever the ultimate conclusion of that will be, I suspect they'll eventually will get passed. Maybe this legislative session, maybe another one. But what I think is kind of happening here is they don't want to just be doing the Apex fights. They want to be having big fighters on their roster, or at a bare minimum, big fighters on their roster. Even if they don't have both, they have at least one of them. And then they can do that and put on big fights of significance on important days in boxing. Like, they want to do, like, what do we consider to be a big fight in boxing? Somebody who's got the Mexican fight fans excited on either Cinco de Mayo or Mexican Independence Day. Like, these are two of the most important days in the boxing calendar, certainly in this hemisphere, and they want to be a part of that. I think it's just this idea of, like, if we're just going to be, if the only presentation we have to the world is, we had one Canelo Crawford, but for the most part it's A versus B in on a Sunday night on Paramount, that's insufficient. It's this desire to do grandeur, right? In the end, it's this desire, Aaron, to be a part of what can be the biggest, most exciting fights that get the fan base going, rather than just this kind of narrow version that they started out, or not vision, but narrow version, I should say, that they started out with.
Yeah, I think that it's very important for them to be a presence on this day, and I think that this is the right fight for that particular venue. But yeah, I don't think that the Apex was ever the long-term plan. I think that they're trying to build slowly. I mean, it's been less than a year since they started. It's basically been half a year since they started doing these events, and you look at some of the names that they've already brought to the table. I think that they're making big strides, but right now, I think they have to play nice in the sandbox with a lot of these other promoters, because that's the way you have to get things done in boxing. They're still new to this, and there are all these established promotions that are have contract with these fighters. You can't just come in and be like, okay, well, you're not now our fighter. There's a lot of different red tape that they have to go through in order to get things done, and I think that that's what they're learning on the fly right now.
Now, the interesting part about this is we have this tweet from Danny Segura. He pointed this out, and I'll read it from Danny. TKO is going to go head-to-head with itself. Garcia-Benn and Noche UFC both are taking place on September 12th. And as he writes, Like last year with Canelo Crawford, it looks like Noche UFC will be on the back burner. You can't fully promote both, and fair to assume Garcia Benn will eat up most of the promotional resources. I was there in Vegas for that week, and I remember I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get into the media room for Canelo Crawford just based on the nature of my adversarial coverage. And I walked right up to the counter and I asked to get in. They let me right in, but like the reason why is because, dude, they looked so overwhelmed because part of the crew was doing the Noche card, part of the crew was there. I had my understanding was they were so short staffed that they had to get some WWE employees to come and kind of like staff the ranks because that was such a huge event. Just Canelo Crawford was a huge event, to say nothing of trying to do both of those. Here's what I'm going to say about this, Aaron. Obviously, if you want to be in the boxing business, right? If you want to be in the boxing business, September 12th is a sacred day, or that weekend, whatever, how you want to, arrange it in the calendar. That's a sacred weekend. Like, you absolutely have to go big there. I have no issue with them going big at that time. But what I'm going to say is that's going to probably be an important day in the calendar as a boxing promoter permanently, right? Permanently. You know that on that day, but that weekend, you have to do something big. And yet they also want to do the Noche UFC thing. If it's always going to be the case that because it's a bigger day in boxing than it is in MMA, that the MMA show gets like short shrift, why can't that show be on Friday? Or why can't one of those shows be on Sunday? But them going head to head, I got to tell you, I don't know if I understand the point of that. Oh, they're different fan bases. Yes, but it's the same company. And I want the company to give each of them the kind of treatment it deserves.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. But you look at it last year, and the Noche main event of Silva versus Diego Lopez was like one of the best fights of the year. But it didn't really interfere with what was happening on the boxing side. Now, maybe from a staffing standpoint, like you mentioned, there's going to be some short-handedness on both sides. But when you look at the card itself, like by the time that wrapped, it was still like an hour or two before the boxing match started. So they can still kind of align it so that they're not really going head to head. Like boxing undercards typically don't do a lot of volume in terms of viewership. Usually they stay for the main event and sometimes the co-main event. Whereas with the UFC, people are kind of accustomed to watching from beginning to end. So as long as there's no overlap with like the two main events, which I can't imagine them doing that, I think that they're going to be okay. Now, in terms of staffing, that's something they're going to have to figure out on their own end. Are there other people from, Golden Boy that can help out in terms of some of the PR or anything along those lines? Again, they've got some time to figure that out, but I don't really see it as being a big issue with the two events overlapping a little bit, as long as the main event of the UFC is wrapped before maybe the co-main of the boxing card.
I see the point, but I don't know. For me, I want them separate. Long Island, what do you think? Again, we know that the MMA fan base and the boxing fan base, they don't meaningfully cross over. There is some crossover to them for sure. To Aaron's point, you can stagger them a little bit so that there's really not the kind of important overlap to cause problems. But for me personally, I'd like to see them on different days. Where are you on this?
Yeah, I'd like to see him on different days too, but unfortunately, September 12th is not Flag Day, Luke, and that's the only time they move events. So we'll have to look past it. But, maybe in the future.
Right, I forgot. Flag Day, you can just move stuff around, but otherwise, you're kind of locked in here. All right, let's go to topic number 5. We got a bunch of MMA quick hits. These should be fun. We got, I think, just the right co-host today to help us out with these. Okay. What do you want to say right up front? Pumi Nakuta's appeal to get his loss overturned in California. This was, you'll recall, the Adriano Moraes fight where Moraes held the choke, and it looked like, again, Aaron, it looked like he held it past the point of the round actually ending. And then by the time referee Herb Dean had separated them, Nakuta was already out. Did the California Athletic Commission make the right call?
God, it pains me so much to say this, Luke, but they made the right call.
Why?
They made the wrong call on the night. They made the right call on this.
Okay, explain that.
Okay, so on the night of, the choke is held for too long, for sure. At that point in time, the referee has to either DQ Moraes because he held the choke for too long, or you can take a point and go to the scorecards. But the determination made by the official, which I believe was Herb Dean on the night of, was that Nakuda was out before the final bell went, and he determined that it was a submission. So for the California State Athletic Commission, the only way that they can really overturn this and not bury the referee is if they can, without a shadow of a doubt, say that Nakuda was definitely not out when the bell rang. And I like looking at the video, I don't know if you can make that determination with 100% certainty. So if there's even an inkling of a chance that Nakuda was out at the final bell, they can't overturn it. So like that's why I think that they made the right call in this instance, because it would be really difficult to overturn it based on the information put in front of them after the fact. But I do think on the night of, the officiating could have done a much better job of finding a better result for that fight. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I just it's always amazing to me how many ways the regulatory apparatus in the country has to protect itself from accountability in any capacity, you know, like whatever the right answer may end up being, they never seem to find it. And it's just quite frustrating to see, you know, fights go the way they go sometimes.
You know what bothers me about that? I wasn't there that night covering the event, but the California State Athletic Commission is maybe the only commission that actually has their doors open at the end of the night to media when they had their debrief. And I didn't see any media members go to that debrief and talk to them about what happened there. And I think that is a missed opportunity from those covering the events. Like, I know you got your press conferences afterwards. They tend to overlap. But if there was any media outlet that had like more than one person there, they should have sent one person to that meeting to see what, you know, how they ended up coming to the conclusion that that was a submission loss. Because to me, I think that could have been handled much better from a protocol standpoint. It's just like, again, if we're talking about should they have overturned it, I believe the answer is no. And I hate to say it, because I think, again, they got it wrong on the night. But I think that in hindsight, when you look at what you need to do, what the information that you need and the evidence that you need in order to overturn a result, I don't think that they had that evidence.
After his recent loss to Shara Bullet, Michelle Pereira was removed from the UFC roster. Here's Guilherme Cruz saying Pereira signed a one-fight deal to face Shara Bullet at UFC Baku in June. That was after the completion of a previous deal, and then he lost via decision. But here's the deal. As you recall, Aaron, he got fouled repeatedly in this fight. If you get fouled repeatedly in a fight and you still lose, should you get cut after that? I mean, I don't mind that he's not there because I don't think he's very good. But I got to say, I feel kind of bad for the guy because he got fouled and then cut.
Well, here's my question. If they had deducted a point, it's still a draw. He's still on a one-fight deal. They still might not have brought him back. So I'll just say that. But here's the bigger issue here is referees and officials that I've spoken to, one of the reasons why referees don't take a point is because, we don't want to impact the result of the fight. We don't want to hurt a fighter's chances. And, you know, but this is why you take the point. Because by not taking the point, now you have negatively impacted a fighter's career and livelihood because they didn't get re-signed due to losing the fight. They lost the fight because you didn't have the faculties to take away a point in what was an obvious point deduction. You've warned the guy. You call timeout for no reason. What, to warn him again? Listen, I've taken officiating courses. So I feel like I can speak on this. And I've spoken to referees, and I always say, if I can rationalize it in the mind of an official, that's all I need to do. So like Mark Goddard allowing the fight to go into the fourth round with Ilya, I can rationalize it because Ilya's like, I want to fight. It's a championship fight. It's at the White House. The fighter shouldn't be able to make that call, but the referee as sole arbiter can make that call. If I look at the one where Pereira's getting hit in the back of the head by Gane, if I'm Herb Dean and I see that, maybe he should have warned him. But if you call a timeout there and Alex says, I can't continue, and it was a sequence started by a stiff jab, now you're going to have a no contest because of like, not because he's intentionally hitting a guy to the back of the head, but because a guy's moving and he's getting, guns throwing a bit recklessly for sure, but at the same time, he's not targeting the back of the head necessarily. Do you want to risk having a no contest in a fight like that from a sequence that was started by a powerful jab? I understand why he's not necessarily calling a timeout and checking on the fighter and all that. Like, I can rationalize it. I'm not saying it's the right move. For this one, I cannot rationalize it. Hair pulling is an intentional foul. It's not accidental. He did it once. You gave the guy a warning. Cool. If you're going to call a timeout in that situation, you need to take a point. There's no other reason to call a timeout in that situation. He doesn't take a point, and now you have, like, factually created a negative situation for a fighter by not enforcing the rules on what is clearly an intentional foul. Kick to the groin, not intentional foul, accidental. You can still take a point there. Eye poke, not intentional. You can still take a point there. Hair pulling is an intentional, illegal act. If you're the referee in that situation, you need to take a point.
Can't say it much better than that. Give me your early thoughts on the announced Michael Venom Page versus Nursultan Ruziboev fight for UFC Paris. And more to that point, Aaron, just the way in which, I have to say, it's not like MVP's UFC run has been some kind of disaster. Far from it. But I don't know. It just hasn't been what I thought it would be. What do you make of this?
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who had a razor-thin fight against a guy who was fighting for the championship next month in Ian Machado Gary. And it just seems like they're just putting him in to plug holes in fight cards as opposed to using a guy who is extremely talented and putting him in spots where he can show off those talents. This fight doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Ruziboev's a huge guy, and I think it's going to be an interesting matchup. I just don't know what it does for either guy, really. And I would like to see them utilize Michael Venom Page in spots against bigger name fighters. He's at the stage of his career where he's, it's going to be winding down soon. So what's the upside of putting him in a fight against a guy like Ruziboev?
Outside of that, there was a announcement from one championship on the grappling side this week that basically all the major pro grappling events of the world, so this would be who's number one. So that's different. There's one, and then who's number one. These are two different ones. Polaris, CJI, IBJJF, ADCC, that they all plan to work together. I think this is for event promotion, sharing of talent, you name it. Clearly, in my view, I say clearly, so I'll take that back. But in my view, Aaron, they're doing this to combat the rise of UFC BJJ. What do you make of all of these different entities? And again, I mean, we're talking about gi, no gi. We're talking about pro. We're talking about, in orgs like IBJJF, which has been, sort of like the spine of how all competition has worked for the last 20 plus years, all working together and also being on Flow Grappling. Is this a meaningful challenge to UFC BJJ?
I'm not really sure. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not sure what the audience for BJJ looks like overall. I think that, I don't know what the viewership's like for UFC BJJ. I just know that they were hosting a lot of BJJ events on Fight Pass, and I think they just decided, well, we can do this better if we just utilize our promotional machine to try to promote this. So I think that, if you're in the BJJ world, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about it. I just don't know if I can give a great answer here, because I think that it is the one thing that it definitely says is that UFC BJJ has shown that it's a big threat to the other grappling promotions out there. And I think that's really what it was designed to do.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, right, the devil's in the details. Like, whatever is executed, that vision is the way we'll judge whether or not this was successful. So to that end, I guess we shall see. I'll just say, if it really is about talent sharing and it is really about co-event promotion, and this doesn't work, then nothing was ever gonna work. You know what I mean? Because this is exactly what you would need. And I think what they're really trying to do here is more than just like, oh, we'll put our promotional resources together. That's kind of important. But the big one is just giving athletes flexibility to move around. That, I think, is the vision that they're trying to sell versus just signing to one particular promoter. But again, to your point, we have to see what the execution of this vision ultimately amounts to before we can say whether or not it's pretty good. But I'll say this, the fact that you got the BJJ shows to kind of work together, this is something we had hoped MMA promoters would do, 20 plus years ago, and to make the biggest and best shows that they could outside of UFC. And of course, they never really did. So maybe jiu-jitsu learned lessons that MMA promoters didn't. I'll be curious to follow this one. All right, last but not least, who deserved the 2026 ESPY for Fighter of the Year? Now, these were the nominees: Clarissa Shields, Gabriela Fundora, and then the bottom ones were the one we're kind of going to talk about here. Terrence Crawford is the one who ultimately won it, but there's a lot of consternation about Justin Gaethje, who obviously had maybe the performance of a lifetime against Ilia Topuria on the White House lawn. Was the highlight robbed, Aaron Bronsteter?
Well, for starters, that's kind of a weird field of nominees, but I don't think so. I think what Terrence Crawford did was unbelievable and was revelatory in the world of boxing. Now, I think the bigger question is, why are boxers and mixed martial artists in the same category anyways for the ESPYs? Why not have a boxer of the year and mixed martial artist of the year, and then we can stop this conversation as a whole? Like, are there that many categories that they can't split them up since they are two completely different sports?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think maybe they used to. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not sure. I think that probably for simplicity's sake, but then it just creates these kinds of dynamics. I mean, it's worth like talking about this one for just a second. Here's the thing: like, what Gaethje pulled off is insanely remarkable in so many ways. But this is the deal: like, Bud Crawford went up 3 weight classes into a place he had never even competed and took all the titles off Canelo. Like, that's just more impressive. I don't know what else to say. There's a story about what kind of character Gaethje had to show, Aaron, to rally himself after a devastating loss to Max Holloway to come back and beat Fiziev. And yes, beating Patty was, some degree widely expected, but late in his run, and then to show up and beat Topuria. It's not to say that that's not some kind of an achievement that even what Crawford did can't touch in terms of like just what it shows about his character. But if we're asking about like an athletic achievement, and we're comparing it 1-to-1 in this particular case, going up in weight and grabbing titles in a weight class you've never even been before, bro, it's just matter-of-factly harder to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slam dunk if you look at what the actual, historical achievement right there is. But I don't know. Does it even matter really? It's the ESPYs. It's who's determining who the nominees are, who's voting on it. I don't know. I don't know if it really. I know that like Gaethje's manager Ali Abdelaziz is upset about it, and I'm sure a lot of people in the MMA space are upset about it if they don't understand what exactly Crawford did and why it's so important. But like, ultimately, I think the best way to do it would be to just separate it into 2 different categories going forward, and then you don't have to worry about this kind of tomfoolery to begin with.
Jed Mishu texting me live right now said they used to have 2 separate ESPYs, but when UFC left ESPN, they merged them into 1 category.
Ooh.
See, now we've got a real debate. Like, maybe you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Maybe you should treat 2 different sports as different sports. Like, are you going to do the goal scorer of the year, and we've got Messi and we've got Connor McDavid? Yeah. Like, we've got soccer and hockey combined. Let's determine who the best goal scorer of the year is. It's like, you would never do that. So let's just separate them into 2 different sports, can we?
Yeah, I don't disagree with the idea. All right, that is our top 5. And with that in mind, we are now going to play a game. I never know if it's rate or if it's rank, but it's all about that card.
Rank that card! It sucks.
Quite rank, like the quality of the card, Luke. It's rank, Right. Anyways, LT, you're up first. Which undefeated fighter is most likely to lose tomorrow? RJ Harris, Tommy McMillan, or Levi Rodriguez?
Brother, I don't even know what the odds are on the other 2. I'm putting old Diggity Donk McMillan at the top of that fucking list.
Okay, RJ Harris, for reference, is plus 114. Tommy McMillan, we talked about earlier, is minus 166, and Levi Rodriguez is minus 155. So
all right. So in that case, I'll go Tommy, RJ, Levi.
Okay. AB, you changing that at all?
I'm going to go RJ, Levi, McMillan.
I'm going Tommy number 1. Tommy, Levi, RJ. No, Tommy, RJ, Levi. Yeah. All right, AB, which underdog has the best chance of winning? Kamaru Usman, Tabitha Ricci, or Alberto Montez?
I'm going to say Alberto. I need to rank them?
Yeah, just.
I'll go Montez, Usman, Ricci. Although I do think that the value on Ricci is immense.
Right? Those are crazy. I think Fatima Klein wins that fight, but the odds are just crazy to me on that. LT, you changing that?
I'll go Montez, Usman, Ricci.
All right, so same thing. Yeah, I agree. LT, which fighter is going to have more UFC fights after tomorrow? Jared Cannonier, Mitch Ramirez, or Kamaru Usman?
That's a good question, man. Honestly, even though he's the oldest, I'm going to go Jared Cannonier. Just the way he's talking about like how much more he still wants it. You know, Kamaru still wants it for the big prize, and I'm sure Mitch still wants it, but there's a question of his ability. But Cannonier, he's proven to be quite the stubborn fellow, one way or the other. I'll go with him 1. I'll say Usman 2, Ramirez 3.
Okay, I think that's fair. AB?
I'd flip Usman and Cannonier. I think Usman, Cannonier, Ramirez.
I agree with that. I think Cannonier, if he gets finished, I think he might be done after that. AB, who's the most entertaining fighter on the card? Tommy McMillan, Dricus Du Plessis, or Christian Leroy Duncan?
I'm gonna go Du Plessis, McMillan, CLD, but they're all entertaining. But I'm gonna go with that.
For once, I actually struggled with coming up with 3 guys on this. I was like, you know what? There's really not that many entertaining fighters on it. Like, no clear cut. Normally, you get like, oh, that guy's all action. That guy. LT, you changing that order?
I'll go DDP. I know he's a car crash, but that kind of thing is not my style for the most part. So I'll go DDP, CLD, oh, diggity D, Tommy McMillan.
I think as much of a donk as he is entertaining, you know, and also people like root for him to lose. So there's that entertainment factor as well. LT, which prospect is BC most likely to have his eyes on?
Oh, wow.
Fatima Klein, Anna Milosano, or Tabitha Ricci?
You know what? That's a good question. Before I answer that, let me go and survey.
Do some research.
Yeah, let me do some research on this to make sure that I'm up to speed. Let's see here. As I pull this up, it's not even on this one.
See, we know Ricci probably isn't in the running as far as his taste, but she does date Callum Walsh, and we know BC loves Callum Walsh. She did call that card.
Just knowing BC, I'm gonna go Milosano 1.
Okay.
Ricci 2, Klein 3.
All right. I think that's
Oh, yeah.
AB, you think that's any different? You think that's
I just got to go with Luke because he's like a BC anthropologist, and I just feel like it would be. I mean, you've got so many more hours of experience with BC that I feel like
you know how like Jane Goodall like studied apes and chimpanzees. That's how I've studied Ryan Campbell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why I'm gonna defer to you. I think that you've got the hours of experience. You're like you've got your 10,000 hours with BC. You're like an expert now.
That's true. That's true. All right, AB, which fighter's name is LT most likely to overpronounce? I'm going to get him to pronounce these after this. Alberto Montes, Levi Rodriguez, or Mitch Ramirez?
Well, he tends to not pronounce. He tends to go with the non-Brazilian pronunciations. So I'm going to go Alberto Montes, number 1, Mitch Ramirez, number 2, and Levi Rodriguez, number 3, because I don't think he would say Rodriguez. I think he'd defer to his Colombian side and say Rodriguez.
Well, also, is it Rodriguez?
Like, Rodriguez, yes.
Yeah,
Rodriguez,
right?
yeah.
All right. I think, well, we'll see what LT does, but I think Mitch Ramirez is going to be before Levi there. LT, what are the, say all the names.
I think it would go in order because like the name, if the name is visibly from that culture, that's the trigger to, in your word, see, you call it overpronouncing. I call it properly pronouncing.
Yeah, because if it was Tatsuro Taira, you'd be like, yeah, Tatsuro Taira, whatever the fuck
Japanese.
his name is.
I don't know how to speak Japanese. Like I have no frame of reference.
Pat Sabatini, whatever the fuck his name.
You're not like Taira Tatsuro. You're not like pronouncing it like the last name.
I'll end up sounding just racist doing that. I don't want to do that, you know. But feel the other ones I can tread water a little bit. It's Alberto Montes.
Ooh, nailed it.
So that'd be 1. Yeah, I would just say Levi Rodriguez, and then Mitch Ramirez.
I
You
knew
know what
it.
I'm
I knew
saying?
it. All right, so it's Alberto, Mitch, then Levi, right? Like you gotta. That's
Yeah, I
the
guess
1,
it
2,
would
3.
be. I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
it would be.
I've got to get you on the Raijin train instead of Ryzen. It's Raijin because
Yeah.
they sent
Is
out
that
an
what it
email
is?
saying that's how it's pronounced. So we've got to start spreading the word of Raijin.
You're right. We do. I didn't know that.
It took long enough to get Risen or Ryzen. I'm not going to Rajin or whatever the fuck at this point. You know, they've lost that. LT, which fighter's stock will drop the most with a loss on Saturday? Chase Hooper, Jose Delgado, or Tommy McMillan?
Man, I'm going to go Chase Hooper, especially after he missed weight. I think this would be real bad for him. McMillan would also be bad, but not fatal because I just think he's destined to be kind of up and down by virtue of how he fights. So I'll actually go in the order you have here. I actually feel like Chase would be the worst. Delgado would be there's hype slowly beginning to build for him. And then McMillan, it's a little bit more expected he'd be up and down.
I think that's fair. AB, you changing that?
I agree 100%.
All right, that's fair. AB, which Arizona prospect is most likely to challenge for a belt one day? They all train in Arizona. Ezra Elliott, Jose Delgado, or Tommy McMillan?
Who? I just don't know enough about Ezra Elliott yet. So I would go Delgado, McMillan, Elliott.
All right, LT.
I'll go. I think, yeah. Delgado, Elliott, McMillan.
I'm with you, LT. I'm putting McMillan last. All right, last one for each of you. LT, which nickname are you going to choose for Aaron to adopt? Aaron the Killer Gorilla Bronsteter, Aaron Baby Shark Bronsteter, or Aaron the Hammer Bronsteter?
There's two good choices here, and neither of them are Baby Shark. Let's just be very clear about that. Killer Gorilla actually would be kind of fun for Aaron. I do think that's what you got to think. Aaron the Killer Gorilla Bronsteter. That's just a lot that's happening there.
Yeah.
You know, because you got a lot of just syllables in the name. But if you had Aaron the Hammer Bronsteter, I think that one just kind of rolls off the tongue. So I'll go Hammer, Gorilla, Shark.
AB, which one would you choose?
Oh, you got to look at the hair on these arms. We got Killer Gorilla number 1, Hammer number 2, and Baby Shark number 3.
All right, so same as LT. All right, well, AB, which nickname would you choose for LT to adopt?
Oh,
Luke, the Nigerian
nightmare
Thomas. Luke, the Promise Thomas, which I like because it rhymes.
Oh, it does rhyme.
The Korean Tyson Thomas.
Well, I think it would be the Indian nightmare for Luke.
No, you got to go with whatever it is.
In India.
It's like when we made him the Mongolian murderer. You know, you got to just go with whatever the nickname is.
Well, I'm going to go the Promise number 1, just because there's no nationality that isn't his involved in it. And then we're going to go the Korean Tyson followed by the Nigerian Nightmare.
LT,
because Luke doesn't get any sleep, so I mean he doesn't have nightmares and can't produce nightmares.
Oh, that's actually that's a good point. LT, which one are you choosing for yourself?
I mean, just to troll the donks, I might go with Nigerian Nightmare, to be honest with you. But in all likelihood, I'd go Promise, Tyson, Nightmare. Yeah.
All right, that's fair. All right, guys. Well, that was Rank That Card. Hope you enjoyed it.
Fun. All right. With that in mind, we got to take a look at the artwork and put it on our proverbial fridge. We do it all the time. You can send it to us at morningcombat@gmail.com. It's time for fan subs.
You've got mail.
Viewers.
All right. We got 2 memes from John McClane, and John is usually quite good at this. So let's see. Binge drinking in my 20s. Binge drinking in my 40s. Bro, the hangovers, bro.
Oh, dude, I can relate to that.
Oh,
Like if I have like 1 beer now, I'm feeling it in the morning. Like just one.
You know what my limit is, and I'm being dead serious. I know what it is now. I can have 2, maybe. If sometimes this is a little hit or miss, but let's just say I'm on the high end. I can have 3 adult beverages now before the problem starts. Once you hit 4, for sure, I know my sleep is now going to be fucked up.
I'm feeling these margaritas, Brian Campbell.
Yeah, I stopped at 3 there too.
I had 2 O'Douls last night, passed out, just totally passed out on the floor.
Bro, what is the value?
Who actually drinks O'Douls? I didn't know anyone actually.
That's a non-alcoholic beer. That was the joke.
A buddy of mine quit drinking and drinks non-alcoholic beer, and I was asking him like why? He's like, well, I miss the taste of beer, and I was like, I don't drink beer for the taste, brother. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, but all right, my buddy is a recovering alcoholic and he drinks non-alcoholic beer, and I
Yeah.
get it for that sense. You want to just hang with everyone, you want to sip on some beers. It's different than sipping on a non-alcoholic drink. You'd be like chugging waters. You want to like go at the same pace
Bro,
as everyone. You slow.
Sean Shark did this interview on one of these like UFC programs that used to air on Spike TV, and like Amber Nicole Miller, or maybe it was somebody else, I can't remember who it was, interviewed him, and he had this like, have you ever seen this, Aaron? He had this paste. It was almost like a bread, so something like a cross between like a paste and a bread. Like it was congealed together enough where he could wrap it in saran wrap and then eat it later. And it just looked like someone had taken all the food in his cabinet and then blended it in a blender, and then it just congealed into this thing. And he was like, this is how I eat. And she was like, how does it taste? And dude, he looked at her in this interview like with the most, piercing look of like discontent. And he was like, I don't eat for taste. I eat for performance. And I was like, yeah, that's how I drink. That's how I drink. All right, we got another one. Wait. Is that Godzilla in the middle?
I don't know the references, but Chuck's clearly on the left. You're in
Yes.
the middle, and I'm on the right. But I don't actually know what.
So you're
movie in.
Reptile?
Sure.
Yes, you're Reptile. Bronsteter, you a big MK fan? I mean, by that I don't mean Morning Kombat. I mean Mortal Kombat.
I played like the first 3 games pretty regularly when I was younger, but my son has the newer one, and I've button mashed against him in that game. But yeah, I mean, the reference is pretty. Like, I don't understand why you're Scorpion and why Chuck is Sub-Zero, but I understand Luke.
Well, Chuck's
So
Sub-Zero.
Chuck is
This
the
is
Iceman.
Iceman.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Iceman. Okay, I got
Yeah.
it now. Yeah, I don't know why you would be Scorpion. I don't know. You're gonna need to get an explanation.
Godzilla is what I call my daughter when she comes home
Oh,
from
that I know, yeah.
school, because she just like rampages through the house.
Mhm.
And then obviously my producer is not sober.
I
but
wanna point out,
Scorpion doesn't really have any
too-
sort of Godzilla tie-in, really.
Yeah, I want to point out, because I was confused by this, and another meme we were confused by recently, Luke, was that Winnie the Pooh one where we were all like Winnie the Pooh characters. I want to say that person sent us an explanation explaining why each of us were that, and it was fucking hilarious and spot on. I got to get it in for the next episode because we need that. But either way, I want
we
to give
do
them a
need
shout
that.
out because now that we understand it, it's super funny.
I was like a rabbit, and I'm like, why the fuck am I the rabbit? I don't know. All right, we got one from Chewy here. It says, oh, he already did the one. It's choose your fighter. Okay. Jesse's got some memes. Benoit getting subbed in a minute. I'm something of a dog myself. Yes, you are, BSD. All right. He is talking about Comic-Con. Hit him with the cricket drop. That is what you did, bitch. And you know what? That's not going to stop me from
You
going
were
to
talking
Comic-Con.
about toys for 20 minutes to open the show. I mean,
You know what? I've been doing MK long enough where I get the right one time in a while to talk about toys that I got at Comic-Con. Okay. Last but not least, Long Island trying to convince the boys this Apex card is going to be a banger. Luke zoning out, debating in his head which is cooler, jungle disguise Dutch or thermal vision.
This one's
These
an
are the
all-timer.
toys, Aaron, that he was referencing, right?
Oh, I watched the episode this week, Luke. I know what we're talking about. Or I saw them on your live chat, and I guess last week. Yeah.
Hell yeah, bro. Because I'm so pumped about them.
Well,
Fuck
I've got my doesn't look like Daniel Cormier Funko Pop here,
I can't tell if that's racist or not.
and my all-time favorite piece of MMA memorabilia, the personally signed Merab Dvalishvili card.
Oh,
With
sick.
that signature. Look at that signature.
Yeah, it's
I don't have that exact card, but I also have a Merab autograph card.
You
Shout
need
out,
to
Merab.
get the freehand printing card in order to really get the ultimate Merab memorabilia.
from Declan, we've got 3 memes. First is whenever Luke says, I am not coming to you from Los Estados Unidos today. I don't get it.
It means that you intro every show with it, and if not, you are just dead.
It's you in the bomb shelter, I think. Like you're always in like a shitty spot with shitty Wi-Fi.
Oh,
You
I
look like
see,
you're
I
being
see,
held
okay.
hostage, or you're in a coffin.
All right, that one didn't quite hit. Next one. Fuck. You guys were drilling jumping switch kicks daily for what did you make of that, Aaron? Where John Kavanaugh was like, we were training all of this, for months, and that's why we came out. And if you look at Connor's fights, he always comes out with some kind of a kick. what do you, I mean, obviously hindsight's 2020. What do you make of their idea to even start with that?
I mean, as we know, Max has been historically very susceptible to jumping switch kicks. So, I mean, I certainly can't blame them.
All right. We got another meme from Declan, I think. Let's see. Luke walking past the cleaners at Joseph A. Bank. It's going to be bad. No N-words, but it's definitely going to be bad for sure. I agree with that.
I actually was with a buddy of mine in New York, and I referenced Joseph A. Bank because I thought it was like a gas station convenience store. And then he informed me that it's a menswear store, and it just like blew my mind.
Yes.
That's where you went to find.
I thought it was a gas station.
I figured it was like a Wawa or something, because that's like where you would go to like blow up a bathroom. And then
I cannot believe the longevity of humor that one event has provided. It is genuinely fucking insane.
Well, I get it now. Now knowing that it's like a menswear store, it's just a very obscure place to venture to if that's the emergency you're in.
Listen, let me just say this: any port in the storm, Aaron. Any port in the storm. All right, we got one from Spence here. When they send you to Dagestan for 23 years and forget, oh, you know what? I'm just hanging out with the boys. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Fuck y'all. That's what I got to say. All right, is it Michael or Michelle?
Real quick, go to the next one because I forgot to load those in. I'm loading them in right now.
Is this Rundum Cheeks?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
He says, shout out to the donk who commented on last Friday's episode and gave me the idea for this. Highlights of Luke's vacation: spending time with the family, UFC 329, purchasing Dutch action figure, figuring out Shrek is good in Spanish. I did not know this. Is Shrek good in Spanish? That's what Danny Segura was saying.
Dude, this was the funniest thing running in that episode, Luke, because Danny's like, yeah, no movies are good in Spanish, except Shrek. Shrek is good in Spanish. And then he starts talking, and you could just see your mind. You're like, Shrek is good in Spanish? And then it just like, your mind is thinking. People were like, the whole episode, Luke was wondering if Shrek was good in Spanish. So now it's becoming a joke.
Well, so here's the thing. Like my wife, and she's not the only one. Like I've heard this from many, many Hispanic speakers, that whoever does the Spanish version of Homer Simpson, dude, Latinos that I know, and again, it's very anecdotal, but they will all go to the mat and say that the Spanish language version is better than the English language version, which, for all of us, that's very hard to believe because Homer's like affect and humor is so tied to the way he speaks that's hard for me to believe. But dude, they believe it, Aaron. They swear by it.
That's some Star Wars prequel stuff right there. Just people just tied to their childhood and being in denial. But did you know that Shrek was originally supposed to be voiced by Chris Farley? The more you know.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Was he going to be Scottish?
No, he was just going to be Chris Farley.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I'll say this too. Like one thing that kind of blows my mind is, I don't know why they do this. They'll take Disney characters or any kind of cartoon character, and when they ship it to another country, they just change all the names. And this is not universally true, but it's often very true. Like, so for example, Goofy is not Goofy in Latin America. He's Tribilin. And I got another one where they don't call, and granted, it's a made up word. I know that it's made up, but they don't call Smurfs Smurf. They call them Pitufo. And my question is, if it's a made-up word and y'all can say it easily, why does it need to be Pitufo? Why can't y'all just Smurf it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is weird because it's not like Smurf in like another language would sound any different.
It's like let me get this straight. Like, like one of the arguments people make for football, it's like, dude, every country calls it football. Like even in Latin America, it's football. I'm like, understand something. They spell it F-U-T-B-A-L. They're not saying football. They're just saying sounds that sound like the word football. So y'all can do that, but you can't say Smurf.
And what does Treblino or whatever it is translate to? Does it translate to anything?
Treblin, just a name. I don't know. Okay. Nothing.
Just a name. Because Goofy is like an adverb, right? Or
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or just it's a adjective.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Goofily would be the adverb. Yeah.
All right, we have one more for Rundum Cheeks, I think. Luke Thomas learning Japanese so he can be pretentious in a third language. It's not bukakai, it's bukaki.
Dicks everywhere, dicks.
You know what? I just might learn Japanese just for that, just to dunk on you hoes. All right, we got two more from, again, I don't know if it's Michael or Michelle. Diego Lopez, Benoit Saint-Denis, LT choosing Donk of the Year. It's hard to know, although after what happened to BSD, I might go with that. That was so
I
fucking
mean,
bad.
Lopez did have a second opportunity to correct course, but yeah, I
fair
mean,
point. Fair point. But here's the thing: he lasted the distance both times. You know what I mean?
That's true. BSD, like I interviewed Patty after the loss, and I said, "Might just be me, Patty, but if I was fighting you, I probably wouldn't want to shoot on you in the first 30 seconds of a fight when we're completely dry. But that might just be me." And he got a kick out of that.
Yeah, I would imagine. He must have been like, "This is the easiest money I've ever made in my life," you know. And then we got one more from Michelle. I cannot read this. Someone's got to read this.
Give me a second. It'll pop up on my other screen. Okay. Oh, it's a Billy Madison reference. So it says, Mr. Denis, what you have just done is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever seen. At no point in your rambling, incoherent actions were you ever even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having seen it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul. And then it's BSD saying, okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but then classic. Business ethics.
Yep, business ethics.
You know what? Shakespeare could have been simpler, but it wouldn't have been Shakespeare, would he? So eat my shit. How about that? How about that, everyone? All right. Very good. These were all pretty good. You can send more of these, morningcombat@gmail.com. Aaron Bronsteter, if folks want more of your work, what can they do to get it?
Hey, you just go to www.aaron.report, and I've dutifully listed all of the relevant links in a link tree that you will get to from that website.
And you are going to be covering the OKC fights from home, correct?
Yeah, covering that from home. Next travel will be to Philadelphia for UFC 330. Makhachev versus Machado Gary.
What's your favorite city in the United States to travel to?
I loved New Orleans last year. I'd been there once before. That's a great city to just visit. I don't know if I'd ever want to live there, but it's just a fun city. I love Chicago. Downtown Chicago is always great. Really good food. Those are like two of my favorites. I will say I enjoy those the most. Towards the bottom of the list, Houston, not a great city in my opinion. But yeah, those two are near the top. And I always love going to New York. New York is just always consistently great.
You pick good places. Chicago's great. New Orleans is a gem, no doubt about it. Long Island Luke, what you got going on for today and or the weekend?
I got a new prop quiz dropping in 25 minutes. Mike Bond taking on a newcomer, Doug Vasquez from Sports Illustrated. Aaron, I know you know Doug. So look out for that. And then tomorrow, doing a full card watch along, baby. UFC OKC, or UFC Cock, as the kids are calling it, or UF Cock, excuse me, as the kids are calling it. Starting at 4:45, 15 minutes early. You know the drill. And yeah, shout out to Chicago and New Orleans. Been to both of those cities, actually, and I love both of those cities as well.
Yeah. Good food in both of them, actually, to your point. But yeah, they are great American cities. I will have some coverage as well tomorrow for UFC Oklahoma City, so be on the lookout for that on my YouTube channel. As a reminder, of course, you can become a member of the channel. We have emojis, badges, and certainly more to come. That is available there. We have merch, morningcombat.shop. All of these different designs, all available this month. 20% off of those, and then 50% off of all posters. And as a reminder, morningcombat@gmail.com for the fan subs. And then the best one each month is going to get a free signed poster from us here. So please keep them coming. We really love it. And you guys are doing a phenomenal job. So we thank all of you. Okay, that is it for Friday's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Enjoy all the fights. We'll talk to you all on Monday. So for Aaron, for Long Island Luke, and for everyone else on the show, we appreciate you. Love you. Talk to you Monday. And until then, may all of your gains be loyal.